Hello, everybody, and welcome to StarNet Link. And today we have a guest, and this is Jezra or Jezra, Jezra,
J-Ryze.
and he is gonna go ahead and him talk about his story. So why don't you go ahead, introduce yourself, and ex and ex and explain yourself.
Sure, happy to. Thanks for having me. My name is J-Ryze, and I used law of attraction to get myself out of homelessness, 2 years of homelessness, to become successful, to grow a couple inches taller. And now I co-host my podcast, Eyes Wide Open, where we give you truths that school failed to teach you.
What got you into starting to learn about this stuff? Like, what got you sort of interested in doing this?
That's a good question. Well, I was raised as a Christian by two strongly Christian parents. So I was always sort of spiritual in some way, right? They taught me to believe in a higher power and to conduct myself with love and kindness and keep my vibes positive and so on, right? But they did it from a Christian perspective. And as I got exposed to more and more of the world and more religions and more philosophies and more cultures, I started to see similarities in them. If you really dig deep into Christianity and the teachings of Jesus, you'll find they're very similar to the teachings of Buddhism and the teachings of the law of attraction, modern day manifestation teachers and The Secret and stuff like that. And so I wrote a giant article called Jesus and the Law of Attraction, and it explains all the Bible verses in a different lens, a different form of spirituality. And so after seeing all of these similarities from all these different cultures and religions and spiritualities, I came to realize that there's an overarching spirituality or an umbrella spirituality that you can basically find in all of them. And so they might all have their own nuances and little details and things they want to argue over, but none of them really argue over the overall principle, the overarching principles. Keep your mind positive, marshal your thoughts, manage your mood and your emotions, make disciplined choices, and so on, right? All of these cultures and religions and spiritualities teach these same concepts. And so it seemed to me like this is what to focus on. They all agree. They all teach this in one form or another. So why don't we just nail that? And to me, the clearest teaching of that is law of attraction, right? Law of attraction is very clear about this. All religion aside, all spirituality aside, if you use the tools that humanity has, if you use your mind and your focus and your imagination, if you use your heart and your intuition and your emotions, if you use your body and actions and choices, if you use these things, you can create a wonderful life. And so, yeah, I don't know. That's why I got into it.
For my audience that is starting to still trying to learn about this stuff, can you explain a little bit more in depth about what law of attraction is for my audience?
Sure. Law of attraction is just a model or an explanation or a way of teaching how to create reality or create the life that you want. And it says that the law says that like attracts like. So if your heart and mind are focused on positive things for a prolonged amount of time, you will attract positive things for a prolonged amount of time. If your heart and mind are focused on negative things for a prolonged amount of time, you'll attract negative things for a prolonged amount of time. And the law applies differently it applies the same across all topics. So you could be positive on the topic of health and fitness, but you could be negative on the topic of money. And so law of attraction would attract to you negative experiences about money over and over, but it would also attract to you great experiences about fitness and health over and over and over. So yeah, I know that's the basics of it.
Was it difficult to start learning about this stuff, um or where do you recommend where people to start learning about this type of stuff?
Well, my favorite teacher of law of attraction is Abraham Hicks, or Jerry and Esther Hicks, who channel an entity called Abraham. It gets pretty, woo woo and spiritual and stuff, which I think is probably fine with your audience. But for people who are really new to it and just dipping their toe in, I usually recommend someone gentler, like Gabriel Bernstein or Natasha Grano or Rhonda Byrne. Rhonda Byrne wrote The Secret, which was a pretty famous book and movie from the 90s or early 2000s, I think. And they're a bit more practical and a bit more grounded and a bit more down to earth. And I don't think they teach it as well as Abraham Hicks. And I prefer the channeled source, but they're pretty good for beginners. So take your pick,
Can you, for the audience that is still trying to learn about this stuff, can you explain a little bit more about what channeling is?
Sure. Um, Throughout history, there's been a number of people, human beings, who claim to channel some otherworldly entity or spiritual entity or something, where they turn off their brain or heart or body. They become an empty vessel of some kind and allow this entity to speak through them. And like I said, this gets pretty out there compared to the run of the mill uh, normal society or whatever. But it's not uncommon. And the skeptics of it will say that that's just someone acting differently. Like a good actor could easily pretend to be channeling and no one would know the difference. And so they're just faking it to get your money or get you to listen to them or whatever. Where the believers would say that no, anyone can meditate and become a channel and empty themselves and allow a divine presence or entity to speak through them. There's no real proof either way, so you have to decide for yourself. But I hope that explains the basics of channeling an otherworldly being.
What about, what was something about her teachings of what you have learned from her that you can pass on to other people? Or what do you recommend people to start with, to just basically just step their toes into it and just to go ahead and explore it? Or do you recommend any type of books from authors, or any spiritual, I guess, spiritual treats, or like what do you recommend for someone that is just starting out? Like if they're going through like a really, really deep struggle in life, like where do you recommend to like have them start?
That's a really good question. Hmm. Well, I started with a book called Conversations with God by Neale Donald Walsch. And it was a good gateway or stepping stone for me because I was coming from a Christian background and I believed in God. And Neale Donald Walsch writes law of attraction principles more from that perspective. It's a conversation with God. But I don't know if that's the best introduction for your audience because I'm not sure they're all coming from a Christian background. It seems unlikely. So for them, I might start with the book Ask and It Is Given by Abraham Hicks. Or you can find some free writings from Neville Goddard on the internet. He was a early teacher of law of attraction. Again, though he had a bit of a Christian bent. Or the movie The Secret is a great introduction. Rhonda Byrne gets a few things wrong about law of attraction, and it can kind of send you off into the weeds. But for a true beginner, a real beginner, it's a very consumable, digestible introduction to law of attraction. So I think it serves its purpose. It's kind of like maybe how 50 Shades of Grey is kind of a stepping stone for people into BDSM or something. It's not the greatest movie for that, but it gets your feet wet. And for me, takeaways, like something to start with, especially for someone who's going through a really painful struggle, is really to practice. And I really seriously mean practice. Like practice like it matters. Like practice morning, noon, and night. Practice like you were practicing to compete in a sport or something. Practice being in tune with your feelings and yourself. Because all human beings have feelings. We all have emotions. And they're there for a reason. They're not something to hate or fear or get mad at or any of that. They're a tool. They're like a superpower, actually, because they are our compass to guide us towards the best choices and the best life for us. And the compass can't work if you're constantly fighting it or resisting it or getting mad at it. You have to embrace the feelings, realize they're there for a reason, be thankful for those feelings, and start moving in a different direction. So if we have unpleasant feelings about a topic, it means that we're viewing or thinking about that topic in a harmful way. So for example, when I was homeless, for 2.5 years, I was homeless. And for most of those years, I was miserable because being homeless sucks. And you're alone and abandoned and you have no resources and no shelter and you're fighting the elements and it's just bad. But it didn't have to be. Like I didn't have to feel miserable for 2 years about it. No one was making me feel that way. They're my feelings. But I felt miserable because every time I looked at my situation, I thought unpleasant things about them. Like instead of seeing my homelessness in a positive way, like many celebrities have been homeless, many of the world's most successful people had a homeless period, and I'm following in their footsteps. Unlike my family, who isn't homeless, I'm actually following these successful people's steps. I'm closer to success than most people. Man, this is good. This is going to be a great story for my book. This is going to inspire people in the future. I could have thought any of those things during those 2 years, but I didn't. Instead, I just looked at the situation, moaned and groaned and complained and acted like the world was against me and there's nothing I could do. And oh my God, this is hopeless. And as soon as I start thinking those things, my emotions collapse. Like they scream in agony. Like I will feel very negative things when I think this way. But what I said earlier, the positive framing, would have had me feeling pretty good about myself. I would have been homeless, but I would have had a bounce in my step. I would have been walking through the day and smiling at others because I'd feel confident and happy and proud of myself for my journey instead of beating myself up over it. And so this is how our feelings work. This is how they're a compass. If we think incorrectly or unhelpfully about a topic, they will quickly feel terrible. But if we think helpfully about a topic in a way that serves us or benefits us or puts us on a good track, we'll feel positively. We'll feel good about them. So it's so, so important for anyone who wants to create their own reality and create their own life to start using the superpower of their emotions properly and well. Where most people run from their feelings, bury them, suppress them, hide them, resist them, fight them, get angry at them. They just feel more and more negatively about their negative feelings. And it's like a vicious cycle. So yeah, I think this is where I would start. And I feel most of society, most people really could use some practice at this, embracing their feelings and using them well.
Would you say it's more about changing your perception about the world that you're living in, or would you say that it's more about changing your perception about the like environment, like where you are in life? Would you agree with that?
I think that's a fantastic question or statement or approach. I'm so glad you brought it up. because it's all about perception. Perception is crazy powerful. And when we change our perception of something, anything, ourself, our environment, the world, our life, we will instantly get a change in feelings. So I was really depressed and suicidal when I was homeless, but eventually I just laid on a bench and gave up and said to myself, you know what, if I die here or starve here or dehydrate in the heat or something, that's fine. I'm fine with it. I did my best in this life. I tried my hardest. I didn't get anywhere. I'm just going to stop the struggle, and I'm okay to die here today. And that was a very big perspective shift, because the rest of the 2 years I was fighting and struggling and trying to get out and trying to make ends meet and all this kind of stuff, right? It was a huge perspective shift to lay on a bench and say, I don't care what happens. But I could have had that perspective shift at any time. And when I did, it led to me meeting a celebrity and helping him build his brand and, making more money and doing really well for myself. And like you said, it was that perspective shift that mattered, that played the key role. And it's, as soon as I had it, my heart felt better, my feelings felt better, the tension left my body and the struggle released. And there's lots of struggling people who refuse to even experiment with changing their perspective. Like, they're scared to even say, you know what, maybe this is okay. They think if they say that once in the day, then they're going to stay like that, or life will never change, or they're giving up or giving in or something. And it's like, just try it. Just experiment with changing your perspective, because it's a key factor.
For people that are just starting out, that are a little bit skeptical or not, are sort of unsure, or think that this stuff is just like pseudoscience or strange or evil, like, what do you say to those people? Like, how do you, I guess you want to say, change the mindset? Like, how do you want to, like, get people to see it in a different way, or a better, or in a more positive way, about this type of teachings about spirituality and changing your perception? Like, what do you say to those people? Like, how can you, or what do you tell people that are a little bit skeptical about this?
That's another great question. Before I answer, I'd like to point out that there's 8 billion people on the planet, and all of them have their own unique journey. They're all at different stages in life with different understandings. And so you or I or anyone could put out the most positive, uplifting message or the most helpful teaching ever. And we could phrase it in 100 different ways, or 1,000 different ways if we really want to, extend ourselves, 10,000 different ways if we want to set a record. But even putting out that message 10,000 different ways is still not going to be enough to get all 8 billion people on board. They need to hear the message at a different time, from a different person, in a different accent, from a different lifetime or something, a different lens. And so it took me a long time to understand that no matter how eloquent I am, or how articulate, or how clear my teachings are, or how uplifting my message is, or how positive my vibe is, or my attitude, that there are going to be people who aren't ready to hear this from me in any way, shape, or form. And that's not a bad thing. Like, that's a good thing. It's good that the world has diversity, and it gives everyone else a purpose. Other teachers can do their thing, and I can do my thing, and people can hear it at different times from different people, and that's wonderful. And so now I don't struggle as much or get as passionate about converting people, because people kind of convert themselves from all walks of life when they're ready. So instead, I just do the best I can to teach and help and assist, and whoever is going to hear it is going to hear it. Now, that said, what afflicts most skeptics is a very rational mind and years of indoctrination. Like, they've trained their mind, or their mind's been indoctrinated over so many years to think a certain way and to come to certain conclusions. And their mind isn't really super flexible and agile and, able to play around with new ideas. And that's okay. Why would something that has been trained a certain way and done a certain way thing for so many years in a row, decades in a row, even when they've thought so rationally and they've dismissed all spirituality or whatever the case, why would they ever suddenly be open to new ideas, right? So this is the problem. This is the main problem when you're trying to talk to a skeptic, because you're dealing with their rigidly trained mind, and you want them to go outside of that and try on new ideas. And so knowing this, the easiest way to convince a skeptic is to speak in their language and agree with what their mind says, and approach in a very subtle way and get them to try new ideas in a very subtle way with very baby step kind of thinking or discussion. You just want them to get their feet up with the idea. So I wouldn't go up to a skeptic and say, oh, you should try law of attraction and manifestation. That's how you create your own reality. Because they're just going to get all annoyed about the language, and it's not going to resonate with them. And they're going to be like, no, I don't like any of that stuff. And they'll instantly go into their old dogma and their indoctrinated ways. So instead, I would ask them gentle questions and let them tell me their own reality as a starting point. So if they said, oh, I'm struggling and, I don't know how to solve this or whatever, I wouldn't say try law of attraction. I'd say, do you think that your feelings are telling you anything? Do you think your feelings are telling you something about this? Because everyone has emotions and they know they have feelings, and it's a reasonable question to ask. Like if I'm their friend or I'm talking to them, yeah, I could ask, what are your feelings saying and why are they saying it? And this is sort of like a little doorway into law of attraction, because I can start to talk about the power of emotions. And so then they say, oh, I don't know if they're telling me anything or not, yada, yada, yada. And then I might say, well, have you ever read any successful people's biographies? A lot of them have gut feelings or chapters in them talking about how they heard a calling or they were miserable at their job and they felt like they had to quit. There's a lot of, famous people who got to where they are, and they talked about their feelings in their biographies. And so now we have another doorway in, like, well, all these successful people have been paying attention to their feelings, et cetera, et cetera. And you sort of gently walk them towards a different outlook or a different view or a different perspective. But this is a long journey and it takes a lot of patience. And most people just want to get right to it. You should try law of attraction. It worked for me or whatever. Here's a book, read it. And it's like, this won't convince the skeptics. You have to work with their rational mind and work with their own sense of logic. And if they logically believe spirituality is trash, then you don't start there. If they logically believe only successful celebrities are worth listening to, you start there. So each skeptic is sort of different, but also sort of the same. They're all skeptical and they have their skeptical mind that you have to deal with. And then each of them have a sort of unique, subtle approach that you can take for them. And you could get a handful of them. Like if a whole bunch of skeptics think the same, you could talk to that group of skeptics at once and try and convert them. I wrote an article called Quantum Science and the Law of Attraction. And that was to tackle the people who are skeptical of the science of it all. And it's a pretty interesting article because I make fun of scientists all through the whole thing. But in the end, I point out that law of attraction technically jives with quantum science and quantum physics. Like they line up. And same with the Jesus and the Law of Attraction article. That's for Christian skeptics. They're like, oh, that's voodoo. That's the devil's work. You can't use law of attraction. That's some hippie spirituality. You need to be like Christian and listen to Jesus. And the whole article is like, yeah, but Jesus was teaching the law of attraction. Check it out. And so each group of skeptics, the science skeptics and the Christian skeptics, I'm talking to both of them in their own language. But it took a ton of energy and effort to form my arguments and ask my questions in each of those different lenses or frameworks. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that was a longer answer than you wanted, but I feel like people don't really think about how to convert skeptics, and this is how.
So it seems like law of attraction is one of one of the major spiritual teachings that really, really helped you. What are some other spiritual teachings that helped you on your spiritual journey and learning about spiritual spirituality in general? Like what other teachings helped you?
That's a great question. I when I was a kid, I went to this weird little comic shop called the Hairy Tarantula, and they had a whole bunch of occult books and um, magic Wiccan stuff there. And all my childhood, I was told to stay away from this stuff. Never read this stuff. Never touch this stuff. It's terrible. It will send you to hell. That kind of stuff. But I was drawn to a book called The Lost Teachings of Atlantis. I can't remember who it was by. I remember it had like a blue cover, a blue city on the cover with some floating beings or glowing light or something. And it was a lot of these sort of law of attraction kind of teachings. I barely remember much of it, but I remember it was a huge influence in my life because I knew I could get in trouble for reading this or getting in it. I would hide it like in my room and read it in the dark with the flashlight, and it opened my eyes because I was told these books were bad my whole life, and I'm like, but they're kind of just saying what Jesus says: stay positive, love people, meditate, pray, uh, and you can create a great city like the lost city of Atlantis or something. So that influenced me. Later on, I told you I read Neil Donald Walsh's Conversations with God. And from there, I moved on to Eckhart Tolle and Osho and Napoleon Hill and Abraham Hicks, Joe Vitale. I've read so many spiritual teachings, honestly. Joseph Murphy. Um, yeah, I don't know. I really dove heavily into lots of spiritual teachings. Billy Carson runs Forbidden Knowledge, and he teaches a lot of esoteric things, aliens and UFOs, ancient Egypt, the pyramids, stuff like this. But he also teaches a lot of law of attraction stuff. So I was like, all right, let me check this out too. I mean, yeah, tons of different spiritual influences from all over the place.
You recently said that you written an article about quantum. Can you explain a little bit more about quantum from your article?
Absolutely. So quantum physics is the leading edge of physics. It's the newest model we have, newest theory, newest practice or discipline or field or whatever you call it. And most of what they're discovering in quantum physics lines up with law of attraction. So law of attraction says that you create your own reality. So you as the observer or the controller or the the person, you create your perception and your reality. And quantum physics says anything we measure or observe is being affected and created by us. So they performed an experiment with electrons, and the electrons would either show up as a wave or as a particle, like a solid little particle. And it would give different results under different measurements. Sometimes you would measure it and it would be a wave. Other times you measure it and it would be a particle. And it turned out that who's measuring it and what's measuring it and how it's being measured all decide whether it's a wave or a particle. And when it becomes a particle, like what kind of particle it becomes, what momentum, what movement, what speed. And so this experiment, it was called the double slit experiment. This experiment made science question everything, like what's real. If things aren't solid, if things aren't particles, and things are actually waves, and they change when we look at them or measure them, then what does this mean? And so then they went on to further experiments, like quantum entanglement experiments, where where particle A was miles away and particle B was across the world, and they were separated. But when you did something to particle A, the exact same thing happened to particle B. It's like, how could something that far away ever affect one another? And how could you predictably control them? Like, I'm going to make it do this, and that, and particle B is going to do that. It was nuts. And this shows how, the thought waves of our mind can influence things even miles away. And if it works on a tiny little particle level, then it works on a cluster of particles level, then it works on an object level, then it works on a reality level, right? Because everything's made up of these particles. And so law of attraction says that the energy of your emotions, the electromagnetic energy, the field of your heart and body, and the frequency of your thoughts are all affecting the particles around you. And that people stay stuck in cycles in their lives. They have the same surroundings. They go through the same partners. They ditch one partner. They get a new partner. That partner is the same. They go from abuser to abuser to abuser or whatever. This happens because their overall energy of their emotions and the overall energy of their thoughts are influencing the particles around them the same way all the time. They haven't changed their emotions or thoughts, so they don't really change their reality. But if they were to change their emotions and thoughts significantly and elevate them in a very positive way, if they had a new perception, like you said, or a new perspective rather, then they would change their external reality. Now, it might not happen instantly, but the principle applies, and this is the science. And if you want to know more about a scientific perspective on law of attraction, I believe Joe Dispenza or Bruce Lipton are good people to look into. They explain this quite in depth, and they're better at it than I am.
Would you say that is can spirituality be used, or like the law of attraction, can it also be used not just as a way to like change your perception or the environment that you live in, but can it also be used as healing? Like, can quantum be used as healing?
Absolutely. Like I said, I grew a couple inches as an adult just by using law of attraction. And I believe you talked to Sin, my partner. I helped her heal her toothache or an abscess in her mouth, basically in 6 minutes at night. It was killing her, like throbbing in the nighttime. So I just got up and we did some law of attraction work. We elevated her emotions. We elevated her thoughts. I gave her a new perspective. Well, she gained a new perspective herself by listening to me and working with me. And that new perspective dissipated all the pain, and the abscess healed and went away. Even when I was a kid, I did this by accident. This girl, Selena, came over and she tripped, like her heel broke, the high heel broke off, and she injured her shin. And so I ended up just like soothing it with my hand, and it was healed before she left in the morning. So these are our tip of the iceberg. There are people who do way more. I don't know if you've ever heard of Wim Hof. He is a Dutch breathing expert, and he set a bunch of breathing records, and he runs marathons in the cold, in shorts, in the Arctic, or marathons in the desert with no water and stuff like this. He does really miraculous things with his body. It's all documented and proven, or mostly proven. And he had a group of students in a lab in a hospital, and he taught them to breathe away the virus that was injected into them, or the bacteria. I forget what it was, E. coli or something. And all 15 students used his breathing techniques and his cold water exposure, and they got rid of the disease in 15 minutes or something, or 3 days. I forget what it was. But as I said before, Bruce Lipton and Joe Dispenza also have countless documented cases of healing in these ways. So I think you had a Reiki teacher on last episode, or a
Yeah,
recent
yeah, I did.
episode.
Yeah.
Aaron Jewell, I believe. And so I'm sure she would agree and probably have more evidence and more insight about it than I do.
While you're on your journey of spirituality, did you come up with your own spiritual teachings or spiritual practice?
Kind of. I feel like, well, I don't even know. It's not that I feel like every human being has their own lens and their own taste, and they bring something of themselves to everything that they consume. And again, this would fit with quantum physics because the observer affects everything that they touch or interact with. So, so when I teach about law of attraction, excuse me, or spirituality, people can sometimes pick up elements of Abraham Hicks or elements of Joe Dispenza or elements of, well, most recently I've been reading Reality Transurfing by Vadim Zeland. And he's like a Russian teacher of law of attraction. And his book's 700 pages. I mean, he goes deep and he gives tons of examples, and he has a very different take on it than Abraham Hicks. But I see the similarities. I can tell they're teaching the same thing with their own sort of take on things. And so because of that, whenever I teach it, I have my own spin on it, my own teachings. For example, a lot of times when I teach it, I'll use urban stories and urban language, and I'll swear and cuss a lot, or I'll reference pop culture a lot, or drop a rap lyric or something. And none of these other teachers are going to do that. But I was raised in Toronto and I was into all that stuff, and I played video games, and they didn't do all that. And so the message is going to come through differently from me, and I'm going to put a different spin on it. On top of that, personally, and like, I don't know if it's arrogant or whatever, but I feel like I communicate clearer than them. I might stutter more or be more passionate, but I also frame things in a more layman's terms kind of way. And I understand that not everyone's into the spiritual terminology of it all. And so I often make it more grounded or practical while maintaining fidelity to the original teachings, which is it's a tough balance to walk. I mean, it's challenging, but there are things. I always talk about the third way, and most of the other teachers don't talk about that. Well, what's the third way? The third way is just anytime you see that there's two sides, you get boxed into thinking I have to choose this or that. I have to be left wing or right wing. I have to be masculine or feminine. I have to be X or Y or whatever. But there's always a third way. I could be a blend of masculine and feminine. I could use left wing approaches sometimes or right wing approaches sometimes, depending on the circumstance. There's always a third way. You don't have to always be boxed into stuff like that. So a lot of these teachers won't talk about the third way, but I feel like it's very important in our polarized, divisive, radicalized sort of society. I talk about thoughts, moods, and choices, but not every teacher talks about thoughts, moods, and choices. They have different names for them and different words for them, or they emphasize them differently. A lot of them emphasize thoughts more, but I feel like we live in a sort of thought-driven world, an intellect-driven world where everyone's trying to understand stuff and figure it out with their rational mind. And I put the emphasis on emotions because most people neglect their emotions. And maybe I overemphasize emotions, and some other teacher is going to come along and emphasize choices and action and physicality and body, somatic experiences or something. Or maybe my teaching will evolve and I'll stop putting the emphasis on emotion and start talking more about physical bodily choices and actions because they matter too. Yeah, I hope this answers your question. I feel like I just can't help but have my own teachings on spirituality.
Yeah, everyone has their own little quirks and skill sets that they can apply to their spiritual teachings. Like, uh, the other question that I have that I might be a little bit more important for people, because I know that we all make mistakes. We're not all perfect, and I know you probably made some mistakes along the way. Um, what what can you tell people to like avoid or um feel like they're feel like it's not working? Like what do you want to what do you want to um like explain or say to them if they're having a rough patch with this?
That's an awesome question. I've made so many mistakes. Uh, I don't know. I'm not proud of that, but it is what it is, you know. And it segues perfectly into what I was talking about just now, because to me, one of the biggest mistakes is reading a teacher and they're telling you thoughts matter the most and you should fix your thoughts or whatever. But you happen to be one of those people who needs way more emotional work. And so now you get tricked and now you get caught in the quicksand or the swamp of thought control and you're doing all you can to control your thoughts. Meanwhile, you feel tense and anxiety and depressed and you feel uncomfortable and you're not paying attention to your feelings and then you repress them, or you feel numb and you think that's fine. Like it's fine to come to earth and feel numb. Sure, that's normal. Like I'll just be like, it's like if you're someone who needs a lot of emotional work, you're not going to get results from the law of attraction by fiddling around with thoughts so much, are you? I mean, don't ignore them, but you really don't need much emphasis on them. On the other hand, if you're someone who's working on your emotions all the time and you're just like playing all day and you're happy and your emotions are great, but you keep thinking like, but this is not making me money though, and this is a waste of time though, and like your thoughts are off, right? So maybe you need to focus on thoughts, but the law of attraction teacher is telling you to focus on your emotions. And so now you're screwed again, right? Another mistake because you're focusing on the thing that you're comfortable with. People focus on the thing that they're comfortable with first. If you're comfortable with thoughts, that's going to be your go-to, and you'll pretend like emotions don't matter and physical body doesn't matter. If you're comfortable with emotions, you'll go to emotions first and you'll try to be happy, but you're thinking shitty thoughts and you're like, whatever, I'll work on my thoughts later, or I'll do physical body choices later. Or maybe you're working on thoughts and emotions, but you just sit on the couch and you're not doing anything with action. Like you're not moving your body and you're not being active and you're not making physical choices or bold choices to realize your dreams. You're not writing down a list of to-dos and setting some goals or doing some physical things, any kind of physical things. The point is, you're more comfortable playing around with emotions and thoughts than you are with physical reality. And a lot of spiritual people fall into this because they want to emote and think their way through all of life and ignore or neglect all body processes. They don't want to get fit. They don't want to beautify themselves. They don't want to go for a walk. They don't want to interact with other humans. They want to be an introvert. They don't want to go to a party. They want to meet people. They don't want to shake hands. Nothing. A lot of people who are focused on their emotions and their thoughts, they will often take very little physical action of any kind and then wonder why they can't manifest or create the reality they want. The thing is, all three of these things need to be aligned. When your mind and your heart and your body are all aligned on the same goal or same focus, things happen very quickly. If your body feels thirsty and your mind thinks I should get a drink of water, you might still just sit at your computer and keep working because your body is like, I need water now. That's why it gave the signal. But your mind didn't agree. Your mind didn't say, we need water now. Your mind said, I should get water. This is a weak thought and it's not in agreement with the body. And so it's not going to happen. If your mind says, okay, agreed, we need water now. And your body says, yes, we need water now. But your emotions say, I don't feel like getting up. I feel lazy. I don't feel like it. I'm having more fun doom scrolling. Then you get stuck in doom scrolling and you don't get the glass of water. If you want to create reality and manifest something for yourself, a life experience for yourself, then your mind and your heart and your body really need to be aligned. And the biggest mistake people make is ignoring one or more of these things. They overfocus on one or more of these things and neglect the others. And then they wonder why it's not working. And so far, I haven't found any law of attraction teacher who talks about this. So this is from me alone.
So sorry if we're going to switch gears a lot here, but for like a fun and curious question for my audience and for you, like what is the most, I guess, interesting or more bizarre spiritual teachings that you have found on your spiritual journey that you kind of want to share? I know, or like weird or whatever, like as a fun and fun conversation.
All right, I like it. I like it. Way to switch gears. Hmm. I think the funnest, I mean, it's got to be the funnest, probably by definition, is orgasmic manifestation or sex manifestation or tantric manifestation. I don't know if you've studied any of this or looked into it, but out of all the manifestation techniques, it's got to be the most fun. Like, what feels better than that? I don't know, man. Like, I'm happy to practice it. You know what I mean? Like, no?
No, I never heard about that type of spiritual
Okay.
teaching.
Okay. So sometimes it's called sex magic. And the idea is that when a human is experiencing sexual pleasure or even the arousal of energy, they're building up a lot of manifestation energy. In fact, this is why we can manifest a baby, like a soul into a body. To bring a human soul down into a physical body is some science has no idea how this happens. And this is a very magical, mystical thing. And it happens when there's a lot of love energy between people, physical energy, but ideally emotional love and mental love as well. But the point is, this is a high leverage time of manifestation. And there are teachers, tantric teachers, and so on, who teach you to manage that energy over the days or weeks or months. And either you abstain from sexuality for a while and then engage in it at a certain time, or some suggest celibacy for who knows how long. Others suggest as much sex as possible because you need the practice. And the more you practice and the more you orgasm with another, the more manifestation energy you're going to have and the more focused you're going to be able to be. If you don't practice it very often, you won't be able to be focused in the moment. And the idea is to sort of think of the things you want or feel or imagine the things you want in those moments, like as you orgasm or leading up to it and afterwards in the glow, in the afterglow. And so, yeah, I think out of all the spiritual teachings, this has got to be the most interesting and most fun.
So while you were on your spiritual journey, I know that, sorry if I'm switching gears again, but
Sure.
while you were homeless, what type of resources would you tell a homeless person to start with trying to get out of their homelessness? And what would you recommend for them to start looking into or start doing? Because I know that you were in that path and stuff, but what would you recommend for a person who is homeless?
It's a great question. When when I was homeless, and I believe for most homeless people, they are living in the world of action and they're living in the world of money and finance and trying to scrape together things and make ends meet. And this is the worst like focus to have. But it's where they want to hear solutions. They want to hear go to a shelter or talk to a friend, or they want some tangible action to take. But the real solution to get out of homelessness starts with your imagination and your perspective. And I know it doesn't sound powerful and you want instant results, and imagination feels weird and perspective doesn't seem that helpful, but it is. I know, I've been there. I was homeless for 2.5 years, and I took every action in the world to get out. And I'm a very competent, talented, efficient, productive individual. I'm very focused and disciplined, and nothing would get me out because actions can't solve that. I mean, technically, for some people they could, but it's rare. It's rare that actions are going to solve that. And the highest leverage way to solve a situation like that starts in your imagination and your perspective. And when you change your imagination and perspective, then you start to change your emotions, right? Your emotional compass, like I said, it will start feeling better. And then you'll change your thoughts and start thinking better. And people always tell you, like, you've got to be more positive or you've got to feel better before your reality changes. And it's like, but how? Well, you're not going to magically just randomly feel better. You feel better when you imagine a better feeling thing. No one imagines a great world or a great life or like something wonderful happening to them. And it's like, man, I feel miserable imagining that. Oh, I'm never imagining that again. Like, of course not. You imagine getting a drink of water and it feels good. Like, ah, man. And if you're homeless, like you can imagine helping somebody for money, right? You can imagine like a small little job, or you could imagine shelter. You could imagine anything. And when you're imagining it, you're changing your feelings and you're changing your mood and you're changing your thoughts. And these are the keys to starting to change your situation and change your reality. Running around doing actions isn't going to do it. I've tried. Like it will just keep you stuck in a loop as you grind out and try to scrape by and make ends meet. But if you can elevate your perspective and elevate your imagination and elevate your focus and elevate your feelings and elevate your thoughts, things start to happen, things start to click. I only got out of homelessness after 2.5 years when I changed my perspective, gave up, and laid on a bench. Because then I was open to the universe and I was open to inspiration. And while laying on the bench, the sun was beating down on me. I laid there for 36 hours. There was blisters on the back of my shoulder blades because it kept rubbing against the bench. I was like covered in grass because a park lawnmower drove by, and I didn't even care. It was new for me. This was a new perspective. I was in uncharted territory. I gave up on action and I just laid there. And after 36 hours, I was boiling and thirsty and starving and annoyed. And I was like, screw this, I'm getting up. And I was like, I'm gonna go find some shade or some air conditioning. And I found the library. And I finally went to the library. I don't know why I didn't think of it before. And in the library, I was like, well, I want to stay here for a while. So I guess I'll set up my little ghetto laptop and, I don't know, fiddle around. And I started giving my advice away free on the internet. I'd answer people on Reddit. I answer people on the forums. And one of those forums was Evan Carmichael's forums. I don't know if you've heard of him. He has 3 million followers on YouTube, subscribers. And I helped him get there from 1,000. And by helping and giving advice in his forums with no agenda, not trying to get out of my homelessness, not trying to fix anything, right? Agenda free. I didn't care if I died the same day. I was just like, whatever, I'll help some people before I go. And this energy, this perspective, this vibe got me out of homelessness because he ended up hiring me. We started working together and collaborating together, and I got a percentage of his sales, and like it just started blowing up. And worked with him for decades. And why didn't that happen 2 years ago? Like before the 2 years of homelessness? Like why didn't that happen early on? Why didn't it happen 1 year in? Why didn't it happen 2 years in? It happened when I changed my perspective and I took a different approach and I saw things differently. And I stopped struggling with action. And so anyone who's suffering from homeless or depression or some of these like really tricky problems that like no one can solve or whatever, I bet in almost every case, maybe every case, that they've failed to start with their imagination and their focus and their emotions and thoughts, and they're focused on action or like little, I don't know what to call them, sort of like individual ego actions of how to solve things. And I bet in most cases or all cases, they haven't done the grander scale, more woo-woo, less tangible solutions like imagination and focus or perspective or whatever.
I've noticed from your partner who sent me your alerted me to you, and she said that you and her started a podcast. Do you want to explain for audience that might be curious to learn more from you, can you tell people a little bit more about your podcast?
I'd love to. Thank you so much. It's called Eyes Wide Open Podcast. And our tagline is fresh views on taboos, because I tend to give unique perspectives on things that most people avoid talking about. For example, on our interview together, I talked about orgasmic manifestation, which most people would avoid discussing. I talk about homelessness and suicidal tendencies and stuff like that. And we like to say that one episode is worth 100 hours of traditional education or therapy, because I pack more value into that hour than anybody else. And I make sure people understand in layman's terms what the solutions are and that they come away with value. And this wouldn't happen without my co-host Sin, because she asks amazing questions, like sincere questions, like a layperson would ask, kind of similar to the ones you've been asking here. But she's very good at it, very practiced, and you get sort of this two-sided approach where she asks these innocent little questions that are on everybody's mind, and then I go rambling off on some deep answer. And I really think it's special and unique, and I know it's impacting the world. We've had a lot of great feedback already, and I guess it's up to me to manifest a wider audience. And I thank you for helping with that here.
Yeah, you're very welcome. So we're close to the hour mark. So is there any last messages or advice that you want to give to people that are starting out in spirituality?
You know, I think they should be like you. I I feel you did an absolutely wonderful job listening. You gave me a lot of space to share and talk. A lot of people don't realize how important this is, to listen to others and help them feel heard. And it's a great way to learn. And if you want to learn about spirituality, I would suggest listening to as many spirituality teachings as you can. Really listen, or read, or whatever you can. Just take in and absorb as many as you can. Don't hide from them. Don't run from them. Don't get picky about them. Oh, I like this one. I don't like that one. Put the judgment away and really listen. Because I don't know a lot about you, and you just learned quite a bit about me. And so you come away ahead of the game. Like, you learned a lot here. I mean, I got a different value or benefit, but I'm saying for learning about spirituality, what you have done here is absolutely fantastic. And I think anyone else would be well served to do the same.
Thank you so much for coming on my channel and sharing the knowledge. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for what you're doing, introducing people to all this stuff. I really appreciate you.
Thank you. And I hope that I can talk to you again soon, but thank you so much for coming on.
I'm looking forward to it. Have a wonderful day.
Yeah, you too.